Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're very excited for the session. I want to just take a moment to check in, hoping everyone had a wonderful rest, a wonderful break for the holidays, spent some quality time with loved ones. And without taking any more of the time, I just want to welcome our inflection partners. I'll let them introduce themselves. And I think we can get started with Matt Coleman, who's going to be leading this wonderful session for us.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Matt Coleman. I'm the CEO at Inflection, and we are a group that is committed to ensuring each and every kid gets exactly what they need and how they need it through a community-centered framing. We do a ton of work with community schools up and down the California, and I would say going from east to west, but also going from north to south, but also from going east to west. I'm actually calling in today from Riverbank. So those of you in the Modesto region, I'm in your neighborhood, and we've got a couple of folks that I'll introduce now, and I'll start with Manuel Colon. And I would encourage you, because we're doing this kind of Zoom way, which I personally prefer, where I would encourage you to pin Manuel and pin Aaliyah Van Dyke, who will introduce Aaliyah or have her introduce herself here in a second. But Manuel, would you just give a quick intro and talk about the work you're doing across the state of California, as well as the work you've done at the district level?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Manuel Colon, and I'm the Chief Program Officer for Reflection. I've been in education over 30 years. The majority of my career has been in the Anaheim Union High School District down in Southern California, where I was a teacher, junior high principal, senior high principal, and assistant superintendent, chief academic officer. I retired in 2022. And since retirement, I joined the team at Inflection, who has been a partner in the Anaheim Union High School District for a number of years. And since retirement, I've had the privilege of supporting schools and districts with the community school implementation across the state, primarily in two regions, the Central Coast region, which is the one that we're hosting here, and then the Bay Area region, which includes 8 counties in the Bay Area. And just have been enjoying not only the experience of helping and supporting with implementation, but also learning from all levels, right? From the site level to the district level, to the county level, to the regional level, to the state level. And so I've been privileged to see it from all angles, and really appreciate being here and seeing a lot of familiar faces.
Thank you, Manuel. And Aaliyah, I'd ask you to introduce yourself a little bit, and then I'll share about a couple other folks that are coming, and then we'll kick off. So Aaliyah Van Dyke from Wheatland.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. As Matt said, my name is Aaliyah Van Dyke. I'm the Director of Community Schools and Mental Health at Wheatland High School District up in Northern California. Some folks are lucky enough to kind of come through our community, but many people have never heard of us. I often have to show where we're located on a map, and it's a teeny tiny little spot above Sacramento, about 45 minutes north of Sacramento. We are a small rural district, but we're doing big things. I think our reach is often a lot bigger than people would initially think that we'd be able to accomplish, even with a student population of about 1,200 kids. We've managed to do some really cool things, partnering with Inflection as well. Pretty interesting things, I think, in terms of mental health student support, especially for our most at risk, for our at promise youth, and being able to really expand kind of what it means to have community schools, not just within a high school district, but also within a rural community, and having that become really the heart of our overall strategy of student support.
And I'll just say that she's a freaking rock star, Aaliyah. Wheatland's an amazing place. And a big part of that is because of her leadership. As you all know, these sessions really are designed to focus on the district level. And we're gonna start. I'm gonna project something. This is going to be at the core of what we discussed today. to take a look at this definition of sustainability, but with a little bit of a spin to it. So just take a minute to read this definition. And in case there's anybody on the phone, I guess I'll read it to you also. Sustainability means how deeply priorities like community schools and whole child support are built into the everyday workings of a system. These priorities guide how decisions are made, how people do their jobs, what routines are followed, and how success is measured. In a sustainable system, funding supports the way the work is actually organized and valued, so the work can continue to grow and improve over time without depending on specific individuals, short-term grants, or one-off programs. This is a way of thinking, and when we think about the role specifically of the community schools coordinator, in Aaliyah's case, in a smaller setting, where she's got a hand in what's happening at the school level, but also is working directly with the superintendent and the district level to really reshape how they do their business. As well as I'm gonna point to Manuel. We've got a couple of folks that are coming from Anaheim. And the truth is they have a community, their normal calendared scheduled meeting for their community schools district level coordination is happening at the same time. So they're finishing up there and they'll be here soon. We'll introduce them when they get here, but we'll get started with Manuel really providing some insight from Anaheim Union. So we're going to really zero in and focus ultimately on this concept of sustainability, but through the lens of two districts, Anaheim and Wheatland, who really, if funding were to stop tomorrow, in terms of kind of the classic community school dollars and the grant dollars that both districts have received, the work would continue because that's just how they do business. But that has been with intention. And so I've got a set of questions similar to our last time together that we will focus on. I'm going to take this off the screen in terms of the definition, and we're going to jump into the questions. And I guess the first question, Aaliyah, I'd ask you just to dive a little bit deeper into your experience at Wheatland and kind of Wheatland's journey to date in terms of the work that's been done. And you alluded to it, you started on that. Just give a little bit more information on Wheatland for folks.
Yeah, so my background, I'm a school social worker. I'm also I have my license in social work. So I come into this work from a very not just a mental health focused background, but really this whole child approach is really ingrained in the work that I've done and with behavioral health and in other school districts. I joined our district in 2021, just in a post-COVID world. And it was a very different district when I joined in. And we were really just beginning to kind of launch the foundation of what would really become the community school model that we know today. I think as most folks experienced when schools reopened, was that we were reopening to a student population that had very different needs and much higher needs than we did prior to COVID. And so we really had to figure out how are we going to adapt our approach to make sure that we were serving our students, capturing our students, and making sure that we were really engaging not just with the students and their families, but also within our greater community. So we're currently in year 4 of our community schools grant. We were a little bit unique in that we went straight into implementation. I said we kind of had the foundational pieces of community schools already going, but it really took us to do some deeper dive work to figure out how are we going to make this into a strategy that was as Matt pointed out, as sustainable and really within the overall system, and that would exist far beyond any type of limited grant funding. And so what that really looked like was kind of having a multi-pronged strategy to focus not just on how are our students going to learn, how do we address the barriers to learning, but also how do we really shift our school culture to focus on this idea of education that is not just about classroom knowledge, but really expanding to become, how are we helping our kids become the adults that we all want to see them become when we're working in K-12 education. So what that looked like in practice was we were focused on really expanding a lot of our CTE pathways, making sure students had really rich opportunities to learn that was aligned with their careers, making sure that we had a shared mission statement as a district that really embodied this whole child approach. That was a fairly new one. Figuring out what were the barriers to learning and address those wherever we saw them kind of popping up, whether that was in terms of transportation, if that was in terms of providing after school care, an after school program, in terms of just making sure that our at Promise youth will be able to participate equitably in all aspects of their education. And then really making sure that this work didn't just live within a small team of community schools, but that really was existing in kind of every level of our school district. Granted, that's a lot easier to do in a district like ours because I said we're 1,200 kids. We're essentially a single site LEA. We have technically 3 schools co-located on the same campus, but it's a comprehensive high school, a continuation school, and a community day school. So that really allows us to serve really all of our kids and allow them to kind of remain on campus, and allows us to partner really closely together. But at this point, I think community schools is really embedded not just into our classrooms, it's embedded in our hiring practices and the questions we ask new candidates. It's embedded in, I said, we just revamped our mission statement, it's in there. Our board has been very supportive of the process, our superintendent. And so it's kind of become this thing that is no longer just, when we talk about community schools, oftentimes people don't even know what we're talking about anymore because it's just expanded into like, this is what Wheatland is. And I think that's has been the key piece that has really gave us a lot of confidence to know that this is going to continue past the point of our grant funding and when it finishes next year.
Just to double down and a little bit of an outside perspective, it must have been, may have been 5 years ago, maybe been a little bit, maybe been just before the pandemic, can't recall, but remember engaging with the board. And one of the things that the board identified is they wanted to be a destination district, and that they were stuck on this kind of tagline around a destination district. And at that time, and Aaliyah, you may not have these numbers in the front of your head. I believe Nicole gave me a few months ago, so I think I'll get them right. There was a point in time where Wheatland was at about 750 kids, and that wasn't that long ago, 6 or 7 years ago. They've seen about a 50 to 60% increase. They're in the 11, I can't remember what you said, 11 or 1,200 kids now.
Yeah, we're at 1,200, and I think we were set to increase by another 90 next year as well, because we are getting enrollment from all over.
And part of the destination district is they wanted to stop the bleeding. So there were kids that were jumping in the car or however they were getting to Marysville or wherever, and some of the other the districts, they're not right next door, right? This is a rural setting, so there is a bit of a drive. They stem the flow of kids going out, but then they've been drawing kids in with this focus as a destination district, really being embodied by what it means to be a community school, and the sense of belonging and connection and care, and then the sense of care that kids feel at Wheatland. And so it's amazing work. And again, we'll dive even further into it. Manuel, I'm going to ask you to respond a little bit on the Anaheim side. A little different district, provide just a little bit of context. I think most people on the call may have been on our last time, and the last call that we had back in before the new year. So just give a snapshot of Anaheim. And I guess the question, Manuel, I'm going to pose you a question around district alignment and systems change. Actually, give a little snapshot of Anaheim, and then I'll ask the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you that may not know, Anaheim Union encompasses 5 cities in Southern California. We're at the heart of Disneyland. It sits in our attendance area. We've actually declined in enrollment from a high of over 30,000 students to now around 26,000 students, serving, like I said, five five cities in Southern California, North Orange County to be specific. Our journey for community schools actually started, I would say, a good 10 years ago. And it started, with the hiring of a new superintendent who just retired after 11 years. But it started with really this whole concept of families matter and families are important. The board played a big role in really setting that stage that families needed to come first. And they really pushed on the cabinet at the time that family and community engagement was going to be a priority. And so from there, it really started to evolve. It started with the participation and engagement of the LCAP. The LCAP really set the stage for why having inclusive leadership and collaborative leadership was important. And so the district really demonstrated that through the LCAP process. So as it evolved, family and community engagement became a big piece of that. We hired family and community engagement specialists at each one of our schools that really helped to solidify and prioritize how families were going to engage with our community. And as Wheatland and as Aaliyah shared, students were the priority and helping our students to be successful. There was a big push as well to help our students to be college, career, and life ready. We developed strong partnerships with higher education and our surrounding communities and nonprofits. We developed really a focus on the future of work and the future of what we were preparing our kids for. And so we created a mentorship program, an internship program that still going strong, has over 100 business partners. We created a very robust college and career CTE pathway across the district that has been expanding tremendously. And so all of these things were kind of in already on track for us to really embrace the concepts of community school. We actually started the process of creating community schools prior to the grant even coming out. Most of our schools were cohort 1 schools, so we're now in the 3rd, 4th year of implementation. But prior to the grant coming out, we visited schools in Northern California. We visited schools in the East Coast who had already been doing community school for many, many years. And because it was completely aligned to everything we were already doing, we started to shape our schools and our framework around this concept of community schools. We actually opened 2 community schools the year before the grant was instituted. Our 2 largest schools, Sycamore Junior High School, our largest middle school, and Anaheim High School, our largest high school, became our first community schools that opened up as community schools the year before the grant started. And so that, I would say, gave us a head start on the implementation. Since that, our district now is a full community school district. Every school in our district is a community school, whether they receive the grant or not. We have a very diverse district from 98, 99% Latino free and reduced lunch to high performing. We have one of the top academic schools in the nation, Oxford Academy, and very affluent schools. And so we have a very diverse population in our 5 cities that we serve. But this has been a priority of our school board. This has been a priority of our district cabinet to say this is who we are. So all of our schools are community schools, whether they are officially a grantee or not. We believe that this is how we do education. And so we've instituted not only the family and community engagement position at every school, but we've also implemented community schools coordinators, which have helped really with the process. But this goes really in alignment with not only the district vision and mission, but also our core values as a district.
Thank you, Manuel. And as you think about it, and you heard him reference LCAP, and decisions that were being made early in the implementation of LCAP across the state, right? Before the community school grant and the positioning of dollars around priorities, including, I love, Manuel, how you led with, the board and the new superintendent at that time, who just retired after 11 great years, how they were focused on family and family community partnership. One thing I'm intrigued with, Manuel, and I'd ask you to respond to this, as you think about district level decisions, and how they shape site level priorities and behaviors outside of hiring positions, what were some of the key decisions that were made early on, signaling this idea of community schools and or whole child supports or whole child education were core expectations of the system, not just some nice additional add-on? Does that make sense?
That's a very, a great question, because I think that, you reflect back on what were those key moves, right? Those key positional moves that the district made. I think prioritizing this into the LCAP was a huge move. Most of the roles that we've had, are in the LCAP. Most of the work that we do is across everything that we do. So it's not about, like you said, it's not about necessarily looking at it from the funding perspective, but it's about how we do the work. You know what I mean? We have this saying in our district about, does education work for students, or do students work for education? Because we really have internalized that concept that we have to work for our students, and really creating the systems and structures that help to support that and guide that. And so we've been very instrumental in creating key positions within the district to help support the classroom implementation, to help support the school-wide implementation, to help support the district-wide implementation. And so everybody's working in alignment, everybody's working in conjunction with the goals. And so as we have evolved, it really has been, really building on what we have done previously and refining what we have done. What community schools has done recently in terms of the grant, it has allowed us to really clarify and crystallize how we do education, right? And I would say that through the 4 pillars, it really has allowed us to say, here's how the systems and structures that we've been building for the last 10 years have really adjusted to say, here, in a nutshell, this is what we do, and this is what we do for kids, and this is why things are working. Our outcomes have proven that our students are succeeding not only through school and graduation, but also post-graduation, going on to higher education. We've seen the data to show that our kids have been succeeding. So all of that is that we have been working with really close alignment in what it is that we want for kids, and how does that articulate down through from the district, from the board, really down to the classroom teacher, and it's all very focused and aligned. So that's what I would say, that the key things that we've done has been because the alignment has allowed it to support the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Manuel. Aaliyah, kind of along similar vein, as you think about your role in leading the work, thinking about the board, thinking about Dr. Newman, got to get used to calling her that. Now she's got the big old DR on the front end, but Nicole, the superintendent. When you think about key decisions between 2021 and 2025, 26, when you went from, beginning to implement to now this is just who we are and what we do. Were there a couple of big decisions made, maybe at the quote unquote the district level, board, superintendent, et cetera, that really has shaped your work at the site level?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was quite a few that has come through, and I think one that had come through right before I'd even kind of come into my current position. There was a big focus on like, how do we make sure that our students' educational experience is meeting them where they're at? And not just in terms, as I said, of this traditional view of education where kids are getting their credits and they're moving on, and we're not really responsible for whether or not they're successful. It's we're leaving it to the kids. There was really this shift that like we need to recreate education to fit our students' unique needs. And as Matt pointed out, we've had some pretty changing needs over the past decade or so, not only in terms of growth in terms of population, but also in terms of just the diversity of our school has really expanded. We've changed from being having our free and reduced lunch numbers being about 40% to just under 80%. So it's really significant needs started to come up in our community. And we recognized really early on that we needed to address them if we ever wanted to see our kids truly be successful. And so part of that was the district said, you know, we are going to make sure that we are prioritizing mental health on campus. We saw our students struggling to get to campus or to get to class. And instead of saying like, we need to take a more punitive approach, our board said, let's invest in our kids' mental health. This is going to be a really key piece, especially given that we're in a rural community where there's not a lot of practitioners there. And so that was a really fundamental piece, I think, in ensuring that our kids had the support that they needed to actually access their education. We also started to look at what are some alternative ways we can truly provide education and making sure that students had different pathways to find success, whether that was going to our continuation school. We know that some students have difficulties within comprehensive education. And so our board said, let's make sure that our kids can graduate from our district, regardless of what pathway they need to take to get there. And how do we make sure that we're really investing in these unique programs for our kids? So continuation school got built out. Our community day school, we started making sure that really every kid that was in our district, we had a program that could meet their needs. Whether it was making sure that we had we were able to support students with more significant disabilities on our campus instead of having to have them supported through alternative programs through the county. We said these are our students. We want to be able to support them here. How are we investing in that? And then making sure that we had board policies that really reinforce this idea. And so that way it was supported not just in terms of the practitioners or the individual teachers, but really across our campus, every single teacher was involved in ensuring that our kids had the supports that they needed. I know our board also has been, and Dr. Newman has been really vocal about we need to make sure that our kids are fed. We need to make sure they have resources that allow them to get to school. We need to make sure that we're providing universal transportation so that our kids are able to just actually get here. So all of those key pieces, I think, really shaped us in being able to see some pretty fundamental changes at our site level in terms of attendance, suspension data, in terms of student report of their mental health, and overall just has really allowed us to see a lot more success, especially in some of the traditionally harder to reach populations.
And Aaliyah, I'm totally spacing on it, but I remember when I first met you and started working with your team. What was the tagline you had in terms of kids getting what they need? You remember?
It's every day, every child, whatever it takes.
Exactly, and that is a core. I would argue a core value in a belief that many of everything that you just kind of laid out in my mind, anchors back to that core value.
We actually made that our mission statement this year too. So we formally said, like our board said, we've been saying this for a long time. We need to make sure that we have a mission statement that's reflective of that.
Yeah. And there I'm sincere when I say this. I don't think there's anybody in the state that delivers on that mission statement better than Wheatland. And that is not an overstatement. We've seen a lot of schools, Manuel and I specifically have, and Wheatland does it better, I believe, as well, certainly as well, but better, I think, than anybody. I would encourage you, if we just had a couple of folks join who came from the district community school coordination meeting team, Carlos Hernandez and Kenny Perez. I would encourage those of you, again, that are on the call to pin them. That's what I've done. Manuel, you're off the hook and talking about Anaheim, but Carlos and Kenny, I'm going to give you both a chance just to introduce yourself and your role. Manuel's already talked a little bit about the district and a little bit about the work, and we're just going to pick up, but I want to give you guys an opportunity. And Kenny, because I think you're more important than Carlos. Just kidding. I love Carlos. But Kenny, why don't you introduce yourself and your role first? You got to unmute though.
Is everyone here? Can you hear me through Carlos's screen?
Yeah. We can hear you.
Perfect.
We can hear you.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenny Perez. I proudly serve the community as manager of community schools here in Anaheim.
Hey, Kenny. Yep. Kenny, hang on. You're a little bit scratchy, so get closer to Carlos. There you go.
Literally the same room, and we moved over to a conference room, so we're going to do it this way. All right. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me better? Is this better? Or is our internet just off? Can you hear us? Thumbs up.
No, it's still not great.
Yeah, 1 second. Sorry, guys. We're in the union office. We're not going to blame our union friends. All right. How about this audio?
Yes. Perfect.
All right. Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenny Perez. I proudly serve the Anaheim community as manager of community schools, and I'm happy to be here with you all. Was there a second portion to that question? Sorry. Okay.
That's it. Carlos, tell us about you.
Yep. Good to see you, everyone. Good afternoon. Carlos Hernandez with Anaheim Union. I am, just as of 3 days ago, I was the director of community schools and family community engagement. Now I serve as the executive director at the Anaheim Union High School District. And so been with the district, grew up here. This has been my home for 26 years as an educator and 6 more as a student. So.
Very good. Carlos, I'm gonna stick with you. I want you to think about your role as now an executive director. How does the community schools model? Manuel talked earlier a little bit about LCAP and some of the structural things that you guys have done. When you think about your role from being the district coordinator for community schools as part of your role, you had other things that you were doing. Mm-hmm. Did you step into kind of that cabinet level type position? How does community schools, the 4 pillars, the work, how does that show up in your role on the cabinet and informing the direction the district is moving? And then Kenny, the follow-up is, how does that positively impact your ability to manage the community school implementation across, the 18 plus different sites?
Yeah, I think what has helped us from day one in terms of when we got the community schools grant, that it was seed money to really talk about that. From day one, we were talking about sustainability, and the only way we can sustain it is to create systems, of change around the community schools approach that impact scale the whole child. Not only community schools, what we do on that's what we do on Monday. Absolutely not. Family engagement, that's what we do on Tuesday. Absolutely not. That from day one, we talked about sustainability. And so creating that transformative approach had to be, that through line of whole school, whole child approach. And so we talked about scaling, cohesiveness around the initiative, and starting with our clarity of our why. Every meeting when we meet with whether it's students, staff, families, we talk about our clarity and our vision. and how that creating the unlimited you approach, the identity that we have, and it comes to life through the community schools approach. And the community schools approach is, happens in the classroom, it happens in the campuses, and we deeply listen. We'll talk about the equity transformation cycle is a way that makes sense to the people that are closest to the impact. Our students, when we talk about student agency and voice, they see themselves and they hear themselves in the work around community schools. When we talk about uncovering those trends and patterns for our families and our staff, they see that when they give us their input, we're doing something about it, and we're reimagining what's possible that is allowing us to sustain the work, again, past that grant. From day one, we said it's a 5-year grant. It's seed money to transform things that we've done for a number of years, but we were not connected and we weren't talking to each other. So that opportunity, our superintendent, got behind. Our board said, "Ooh, tell me more." And now we're able to we are year one of this year in terms of merging the LCAP steering committee and the community school steering committee into one holistic approach, and that's going to drive change moving forward.
That's awesome. And Kenny, just follow up with that, just in terms of your role and what are the implications? And I know you do a lot of presenting on community schools, not just in California, but beyond. What do you think makes Anaheim a little bit unique in terms of the support you get from the board, quote unquote, district, cabinet level, to the work you're getting done at the ground level?
Yeah, well, I can't speak enough to how important that support has been for us, having our board and our district. And not only that, but I think the groundwork that has happened, right? I think often when we think of community schools and where you see these new opportunities, there's this notion or idea that we have to start over. But that wasn't our approach. We built on everything that we've worked on so far. So we took our reimagining that happened before and the collaborative work that had happened and built on that. And again, it's really that support from our district board, from our district leadership, that has created the opportunities and systems for us to be able to move this forward. And to give you an example of what that looks like, Matt, I'm thinking about our community of practice, our professional learning. We have been able to bring in educational partners to our professional learning. So when we're talking about community schools, it's not just a community school coordinator or community school teacher lead that are sitting in that room. We're bringing in our principal, we're bringing in our social worker, we're bringing in our counselors, our family and community engagement specialists, other teacher leads, and we're talking about the assets within our community. We're talking about the challenges and how do we leverage those assets? How do we leverage the voice of our students to continue to transform the way we approach our work as an institution? And so I think it's those opportunities, that support to be able to say, yes, we're going to invest in our staff. Yes, we're going to invest in our community by creating that time and that space that has been really the key for us and how we've been able to move forward.
I think in both the examples, both the example from Anaheim and Kenny, so appreciate what you just laid out there. And as Aaliyah spoke, they come from a clear sense of what we value and what we believe. And so whether you're talking about the types of supports that Wheatland is able to do and ensuring kids get what they need. I like to always say when and how they need it, but what they need every day, every kid, every day, anyway. And then Kenny, what you just spoke to, our reflection that values and beliefs, and we like the way we think about it, inflection, it's your core identity. And when there's clarity and identity and it translates into practice, it translates into rituals and routines, it translates into us just how we do our business. You will only see that if it's anchored and tethered to a shared set of values that holds it in place. And full disclosure, at both the site level, but then also at the district level, we often, when we start working with districts and when we're working with sites, we start with that identity. And often that identity is not fully developed. And if it is, it's not tied or linked or tethered directly to specific rituals and routines. Aaliyah, I kind of want to, I'm going to fold two pieces together. I mean, one of the things that I just think's pretty much, it's just unbelievable what you have built. And I'm saying you, the therapist in you, the mental health professional in you, but as the community schools coordinator, the level of support. I want you to talk a little bit about why it's so important to take care of the students, and from a pillar perspective, the integrated student supports for Wheatland, and specifically what the limitations your kids and families have in terms of their ability to access those types of supports. But I also want you to talk a little bit about the creativity that you all have engaged in terms of sustaining some of those resources. I know there's some interesting things that you all have done to get resources to flow outside of the grant, resources that I think for years will last for years and be in place specific to the mental health and the physical supports and that kids need. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think this has been such a key part of our district. Again, this is really just based off of data and need. I think it comes as no surprise that many of our kids, many of our families are struggling. And, it's hard enough to find providers or support when you're in an urban or a suburban area. When you're in a rural area, we're often a bit of a resource desert out here. The town, to give a little bit of context, so our district we're a single site LEA, but we cover 45 square miles. We have some kids that travel upwards of an hour to get to school, sometimes even further. We have kids that are coming to us from not only like our local community in Wheatland, but also in a community called Plumas Lake, which is one of the fastest growing communities in California. It's essentially a suburb without any resources. It's got a Walgreens and a couple gas stations that we pull from Beale Air Force Base, and then also up into the hills in Smartsville. And for our families who are needing services, they are often having to make a choice between, do I go work during the day, come home, pick up my kid, turn around, and then drive another 45 minutes back into town, depending on traffic, to get my kid connected to a doctor or to a dentist or to a therapist? That's not realistic for a lot of our families. It's hard enough for me as a parent and having a lot of resources. It's even harder when you are a family that might be not only struggling, but even those that aren't struggling. It's not realistic for a lot of them. And so when we were really thinking of, okay, what are we going to craft as part of our community school strategy? It was really this idea of how are we turning our school into the hub of community resources. We were it for the community. And so allowing all these resources, whether it was a mobile doctor's office, whether it's a mobile dental clinic, whether it's our food bank, I said our therapy, we have quite a lot of community partners that come onto our campus. But having them coming here has really been fundamental in terms of getting our kids connected and keeping them in school. Just kind of the impact that's had on our daily attendance rate, and seeing kids that are not even just the daily attendance rate, but also how much percentage of their class time are they missing because they're not having to travel 2-3 hours to do these appointments, has been really pivotal. In terms of sustainability and kind of thinking beyond just our grant funding, we have to be creative. I will admit, we're a very grant heavy school. We often we're relying on braiding and blending of funds, but there's often this kind of spider web of grants that are beginning and ending, and it can certainly make our head spin. It does allow for a lot of creativity, but we've had to also be really intentional in saying we know that grants are not the thing that we can rely on long term. And so how are we looking at making sure our practitioners are funded through CYBHI, the California Children's Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, and kind of tapping a lot of those funds, some of our wellness coach funds, looking at just kind of unique ways that we can ensure that these programs last far beyond our grant cycle. So that's been kind of the key thing that we're focusing on now.
Leah, let me ask this quick question connected to that. So the integrated sports, I always say student supports are only integrated if they actually connect to what's happening every period, every day. And sometimes it's tough for us as educators to think about the fact that, gosh, we're responsible kind of for everything. What you just described is you're not just a school, right? You are the community hub, and I think that's the nature of community schools. What was the shift like for, I taught physics back in the day, for your physics teacher, for the folks that are there to teach the content? What was that? What's been that evolution over the last 4, 5, 6 years from a teacher standpoint? You mentioned hiring, so it sounds to me like from a system standpoint, you're hiring people into being a part of a community school, so you lay that expectation out front. But for folks that were there, how did that evolution take place? Was there any key moves that you all made to really help people kind of get there in terms of core staff that have been around for a while?
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge at the start. I think when you especially said rural communities, there is some hesitation when suddenly you have people whose title is social worker coming in and saying, hey, we're going to pull kids from your class and be having doctors on campus, and we're going to be really kind of ensuring that grading starts to shift to take on a more holistic approach. And so there was definitely pushback in the beginning. But at the end of the day, everybody who works in education is here for these shared values. And I think having this really strong mission statement, as Matt pointed out, was really just kind of our motto at the time of every day, every child, whatever it takes. And drilling that in, that this was the key thing that we were going to do, that we were not going to kind of really stop at like, there's a problem. I guess it's not our problem. Somebody's going to fix it eventually. But like, how do we take care of our kids and our families, whatever it takes, and giving our teachers kind of the space to really be creative in terms of problem solving. We started to see this shift kind of happen slowly, where teachers would get on board and start to really, even if they don't always understand what community schools is, they understand this idea of we take care of our kids, we take care of our community. And so we're going to see changes that reinforce that care. In terms of our teaching staff too, we were really able to lean into data, especially data around our attendance, behavior data in terms of the number of students that we were referring out to services and saying, our kids are already struggling. Our teachers see this on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones in the classroom. And so let's work together to address this. And so that really looks like some concrete changes, like in our SST process. We started having that be shifting to having a really core mental health community schools focus. So that way we had a representative from community schools. Often it was me, because we wear many hats in small school districts. But really making sure that we were asking or kind of centering this work in more traditional academic settings. We were also really just partnering with our teachers, often making sure that they were part of the process, letting them know kind of like how they could better support kids. And that really helped them just want to be a part of this work. Even making sure that our advisory council was really rich with our teacher support, and really kind of allowing them to be a part of that success process. And then, as Matt said, with hiring, you just have natural changes in terms of teachers staying on year after year. And so as we think about who we want to bring on board, not just we think about this not just in terms of our teaching staff, but really any new staff member. How are they going to uphold this mission statement? Are they a good fit with what we are trying to achieve? And making sure that those interview questions, or even our employee evaluations, are reflective of that, to ensure that we are all working together as a team towards this greater.
Boy, I think we have internet issues everywhere. I think Aaliyah may have just dropped off. I'm gonna say a couple of things, and hopefully she'll plug back in. Just to give you some context in terms of the impact, and I think this is part of what has helped staff come along, is that they saw the shifts. And just to give you a sense, She mentioned the attendance rates and the increase in attendance rates earlier. Their suspension rates over the last 6 years have dropped by more than 50%. And their grad rates over the last 6 years from 86% to 98% in a relatively short period of time. And as she mentioned, they are more impacted in terms of their student body and their families today than they were yesterday. So in other words, when it was 86%, it was a less impacted community and in terms of kind of the classic measures as we think of demographics. In a similar way, Anaheim has seen similar success. And I guess I'd ask a similar question, Carlos and Kenny, as you think about the community schools, and this is something I bragged on, what I think Wheatland is uniquely kind of best, dare I say, best in the world at in terms of their integrated supports and whatnot. Anaheim does an amazing job in terms of what's happening in the classroom, and specifically community and student-centered learning. And it's something that I think is a challenge for a lot of community schools that are being implemented across the state. And it's often something you get to kind of on the tail end. I'd ask Carlos and Kenny, and Carlos, maybe you, just from the shifts over the last 5 or 6 years that really have helped kind of transform what's happening in the classroom. And then Kenny, following up on that, really the innovative stuff you all are doing around community-centered learning. If you both could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so that's again, when we began the conversation on community schools, it was co-designed and co-facilitated the approach to even expand and hire through the grant with our union. And so big shout out to our union for being partners in this space. And they said, we care about it just as much as, the partners and the families and, the folks at the district office. And so that was heavy. And so to do that together, we hired a community school teacher lead at every one of our schools that was grant funded. And so that person then was charged with working with other instructional leaders on the campus, along with the principals, along with other instructional coaches, to design experiences in the classroom that were heavily focused on, project-based learning. We call them performance task assessments. And the performance tasks centered on the student's assets and the needs. And so start with that deep listening and understanding what our students bring to the table. And so if we can assume that those assets and strengths are living and alive in our students, then how can we bring that out to ensure that cultural relevant interests, passions, aspirations are part of the pedagogical experience that our teachers experience, right? Unleash the teachers and help them create experiences for our students to uncover, to bring those interests and passions to the forefront, to then create those experiences where our students are saying, this is what I want to talk about. And so we see engagement increasing, we see attendance increasing because our teachers see themselves in the classrooms. Now, are we there? The goal is to be every day, every period experiencing that. There's still room to grow. But are we better than we were before? Absolutely. I see it. We see examples of, we see evidence of these performance tasks. We see civic engagement. We see students, doing things in the classroom that lead to external internships, but also external experiences that are in their neighborhood. They're calling to action from the city of Anaheim to county supervisors. They're doing things that are impacting their neighborhoods, their friends, their family. They're bringing in the current events that impact them, and they're doing it as part of the classroom experience. It's not something that is a dessert. It is the meat and potatoes. And so that's the really where we centered our community schools approach, because that is absolutely sustainable. Again, post the grant.
And Kenny, before you go there, I want to throw this in there around PTAs. The PTAs I think of as this macro structure. So it's there every year. Teachers know that they're going to be engaging in these PTAs. The PTAs are connected to community and student-centered learning. It's a structural element to how they do business across the district. And so as Leah talked about, we just lost her, I think, again. We lose Kenny too? No, Kenny's next to me.
He's next to me.
As the macro structures really hold those plays, as Leah alluded to in terms of hiring practices. You hire into this macro structure. So the PTAs are going to hold this idea of community-centered learning in place well beyond Mike Matsuda's tenure as superintendent, well beyond whoever, Jaron, who the new superintendent, well beyond. I mean, it's that macro structure that when you start thinking about from a district perspective, that's a signal that, hey, this is an expectation in terms of how we do business. Now, Kenny, would love for you to dive a little bit deeper in terms of the flow of data and information that feeds, not necessarily, specifically PTAs, but feeds the work at the site level.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been an incredible journey. I know Carlos did a wonderful job about talking about the PTAs. One of the things that we had to do early on when we first started this, when we received the grant and we were talking about community-based learning and bringing in partners and what that looked like, there was like, is it lessons that we're designing? What is it? But the focus really was the how we teach. So regardless of the subject, right? It was how we teach and how do we uplift student voice in our classroom as a teacher? Like, how do we improve that practice, right? Because if we're talking about sustainability and beyond the grant, then that's a practice that will live long beyond any grant. And so what we've done is our community school coordinators and community school teacher leads have done a phenomenal job of running community voice circles, collecting street level data, asking our students about their experience in the classroom. And we've done that in partnership with our union, because when we open ourselves up to feedback, it's not always what we want to hear, right? We put ourselves in a vulnerable place where we're opening up to what our students are saying, their perspective, their real life experiences, and we have to honor that, even if that sometimes feels a little uncomfortable for us. And so that's what we've done. Our coordinators and teacher leads have really our coordinators serve as the data experts, right? And bringing that street level data, those real life experiences. We have the satellite data, all those numbers that tell us these symptoms, but tell us about the root causes. Student, tell us about your connection to the teacher. Tell us what interests you. Do you feel connected to the curriculum? Do you see yourself in the lessons every day? And that's the work that we've really dug into. And really kudos to one of our teams that really stands out at Anaheim High School, where they are not only asking these questions to our students, but they're taking the time, led by a coordinator and our teacher lead, as a staff to look at this data. They're investing their professional learning time to look at the data, and then as smaller communities, whether it's subject area, to think about what are some micro shifts that we can take to create environments where our students feel connected, where our students feel like they're connected to the curriculum, to the classroom, to the adult on the campus. Again, really focusing on the how.
Love that. Love the shout out to Anaheim High, just because I've got their data in the forefront of my mind. In the last 7 years, they've increased graduation rates from 80% to this last year, I believe they're at 97%.
Yeah.
And if A to G is something that you track, their A to G rates 7 years ago were 22%. And they're this last year, I believe, Carlos, correct me if I'm wrong, they were 75%. And demographically, Kenny or Carlos, let's give the quick demographic shift. I know Anaheim High does not look demographically like it did when my father graduated from high school in 1958 from Anaheim High. What's the demographics there?
Yeah. So I grew up in Anaheim, went to Anaheim High School, and 98% of our people like me. They're brown and disadvantaged, socioeconomically disadvantaged. I think we're at like 96%. And English learners, the same. I mean, we have beautiful communities. They bring in tons of cultural wealth, and we leverage that. But yeah, that's some of the data that on paper, it's those marginalized students, the students that are furthest away from opportunity.
And students, and I would say, and I appreciate you framing it from an asset perspective. Part of the reason I bring it up is because they serve a group of students that historically and currently across not only the country, but even in California, the system has not been serving well. And so the systemic change over the last 6-7 years in Anaheim has flipped that. It's flipped the system in terms of playing to the strengths, and it's showing up with groups that have been historically underserved by the educational system writ large. So thank you, Carlos, for that. All right, I'm gonna begin to kind of close it out, and what I'm gonna do is ask And I'll give you a little bit of lead time. And Aaliyah, we'll start with you. We appreciate you fighting with connectivity today. If you're on Verizon, I heard Verizon was out all over the country. So if you got Verizon, it might be a tough day to be online. But what I'm going to do is going to ask you guys just to really think about two things. We'll start with the biggest challenge, the biggest thing that you've really struggled with in terms of implementation, and then kind of the biggest win. So we'll start with the biggest struggle. So we'll hear from each of you on the biggest struggle, and then we'll talk about the biggest win. And then I'd ask folks that are online, if you've got specific questions as they're talking about their struggles and the wins. If you've got questions, go and throw them in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can before we totally close out. So whoever wants to go first with the biggest challenge. You guys are all too polite.
I think when we first started this work, one of our biggest challenges was shifting our team's mindset when we're thinking about sustainability. The focus was sustaining the position, sustaining the staffing, right? The coordinator, the teacher lead. We absolutely want to do that. But what we want to sustain, when we talk about sustaining, we're talking about the practices. Again, going back to that, right? That has been a challenge, and I think we've gained a lot of traction in where our team is finally seeing that is where we sustain this work and the practices. The positions, we're going to sustain them through, I know we talked about CYBHI, right? Our coordinators are certified wellness coaches, where the work that they're already doing, we're billing. We're billing. The community voice circles, we're billing. So we're taking care of that, but really focusing on the practices that are going to live beyond the grant. That, I think, has been one of the biggest challenges in our teams. We saw it in the APR when we talked about sustainability. It was staffing.
Similarly, I think the work around community schools, when you have the word community school in your title, people point to you and say, oh, you're the dude that's going to do the community school work. Similar with family engagement. Oh, you're the person that's going to do family engagement. We're all part of that umbrella. We're all part of that approach as a teacher, as a counselor, as a custodian, as an office staff, as a principal, especially as the principal. And so how do we ensure that we see ourselves in the work as a challenge? The challenge also is to give up a little bit of that power in a collaborative leadership environment. Take a deep breath, everybody, right? Our principal, take a deep breath, right? Our union leaders so how do we give up the power? But ultimately, it's not just collaborative leadership, it's shared responsibility. It's every one of us is responsible for that work. And again, it's not just me providing input and then peace, I'm out, and then somebody else has to do the work. No, you lead it, you lead it, right? And you're responsible to work collaboratively in that space. Challenges, I think, but opportunities to go there.
Yeah, I'll say for us, I mean, siloing has been a big issue. We even for a small district where we probably have the least barriers to siloing and to just collaboration possible, but it is hard. People get caught up in the work and we get short on time, and it's easy to kind of just stay in your job-alike networks and not make sure that this branches out. Likewise, I think as a district, we have been in this ongoing struggle to shift from more of a focus on these like tier 3, even tier 2 interventions to moving it into a whole school strategy, and seeing that the focus is really on these tier 1 universal strategies, and everything is connected. Again, so I didn't get just basically avoiding the silos. I think that one, we made some progress on that, but I think that one's going to be kind of continual work in the foreseeable future.
No, and that's something, and I'll put this out there and maybe get in trouble for saying it, but in the macro California state environment, people will talk about community schools as if it's different than MTSS, as if it's different than community engagement initiative, as if it's different than the Golden Gate Pathways program. And the reality, and I would argue we would argue that the umbrella of community schools allows for all of those things. I've struck a little bit, Aaliyah, in terms of what you're speaking to, and then Carlos earlier, when he was like, "Oh, you're the community school person, you're the family engagement." And that's that siloed piece, and specifically in secondary schools were really designed, I think, fundamentally flawed in that way. And community schools, I think, is a nice bridge, but it's also a bridge with these multiple initiatives that the state's made huge investments in to start to pull them together. I would say to those of you at the district level, which is most of you on this call, that's on you. That is a big part of your responsibility, is to help people see the interconnections and help them understand, especially at the site level, that these are not separate initiatives. These things pull on top of each other. All right, big wins. Give us the big wins. And Carlos, I appreciate you not talking about the University of Oregon getting beat this weekend, because that was a loss, not a win. So Carlos, start with you, and then Kenny, then Aaliyah.
Big win is that I think people are recognizing from the board to our cabinet level, again, cabinet and at the site level. There are gaps in our system. 21 schools, 15 of them are community schools funded, because the state said this is, you're eligible and these schools aren't. But there's students and families that deserve the same experience. And so our board members are saying, what about these other schools? And we got to put money where our mouth is, and we got to get these schools funded the same way in terms of the teacher leads, coordinators, those experiences that all schools deserve. And so we're talking about sustainability, even using general fund right now, even before the grant's over, to fund those other schools. And so that's exciting to know that the board is behind that, and that's a big win, because past the grant, they're going to see the value, and we need to continue to sustain the work.
Big win is community school is all of us. To see the ownership from other directors in different areas and different fields talk about their connection to community schools, their staff's connection to community schools, just to see that evolution from that siloing to community school is all of us, it's a huge win for us.
I think we've seen our big wins come in terms of overall just student engagement, and that's, we can really see that across the board in different metrics. Looking at the percent of students who were missing 10% or more of their periods, which decreased from 57% to 30%. That's not ADA, it's just students that are outside of class at any given time, which was a massive one. Our students were wanting to be in school. We saw our graduation rates for Promise Youth, which is our homeless foster, our migrant ed students, improve from about 75% to closer or to 100% for the last 3 years. Same thing, our suspension data rate was cut in half. So just across the board, we were seeing these massive improvements in our student outcomes, of which has, I think, again, had been a really positive impact on making sure our board is continually bought into this process.
It's a great example that words on a wall, aka mission statements or mottos, mean nothing if you don't use those words to drive action, to drive structures and redesign of systems that reflect what you value and believes, and the belief being what kids need to be successful. And I would say across both these districts, and I know I can speak for Manuel on this, we talk about community schools all the time, and we're engaged with hundreds, literally, throughout California. And these two districts, Anaheim Union High School districts and Wheatland Union High School district, easily two of the best, two that have been recognized as deep dive sites, demonstration sites. I think Anaheim was cohort 1, and I think Wheatland was cohort 2, if I remember right. Amazing work, amazing people. Any questions out there? And I recognize it's late in the day. I don't know about you, but I'm still getting my sea legs back in terms of is it really January 14th? I still can't quite believe that. But if there's any specific questions, we'll open it up, and I'll try to use wait time. All right, I'm gonna come.
Yeah, Isabel has it.
Oh, sorry, I can't see the hands.
Mr. Golo knows I always have to talk because I have so many questions, and this is just super exciting work, right? What captured me today is the idea of the hiring process, and my brain went straight to an instructional coach. And I'll share a little story that happened at our site last week where our principal shared an article on best teaching practices, right, for the teams to work by subject matter. And the feedback we got was, we already know what we're doing, right? But if we could hire an instructional coach that could be on site on an ongoing basis and could provide maybe a menu for our staff members where we can group them, not just by subject matter, because someone said it's not what we're teaching, it's how we're teaching it, right? So if you're having difficulty with student engagement in the classroom, that can be a cohort that can work with this consultant moving forward. If you're having a little bit of trouble with parent engagement, maybe that's another cohort, right? So that we can really tailor the coaching to the needs of the staff rather than a whole picture. This is what we're all doing school-wide. So thank you for sharing that. My question is, how do we drive that? Do we start just with the interviews and serving the teachers? Do we do more classroom visits? How do we make it so that I'm not telling them, hey, teacher, I think you need to work on student engagement, right? That's horrible. So if we can get some guidance on that.
Man, that's good stuff right there. That's the meat and potatoes. First step is getting the right person to be instructional coaches. You have them. We have some amazing teachers everywhere in every one of our schools. Do they have relationships? Do they have a trusting, relationship with those teachers that exist at that school campus? That's where we went first. We interviewed of our 15 schools. We started with the teachers that already had relationships with that specific school community, and to leverage their strengths, their relationships. Community schools is built on relationships, to then be able to walk in and say, hey man, love to, one, share your amazing experiences, but two, also push your thinking. And then second is the data that we use to leverage and push the thinking is the students' insights. Kenny described how do you lift up the insights of our students? How can we first be uncomfortable with that, comfortable with the uncomfortable data that feels evaluative? I mean, we're sitting in the union office and they were the ones that say, oh my gosh, wait a second, that's evaluative. So we said, okay, so we leveraged our site leadership team at those schools in Anaheim in particular to say, all right, teacher leaders, you all decide. Do these questions give us the data that we need in order to drive professional learning in that, in environment of growing? And the teacher leads pushed back on the idea that we were not going to do it. Like, no, we need to do it. It's the right data. Let's go forward. They started with 6 questions. Mm-hmm. We have those examples we can share with Matt, to share with others, and then start from there.
Yeah, I would say, the lovely part about community schools is that we are making a concerted effort to address any of the normal barriers that would prevent a child from learning. And so once those are addressed, the thing that's left is the teaching. And so we've said, okay, you said that this is an issue, like, we are addressing it. We will make sure the kids get here. We will make sure that they're fed, that they have, whatever it is they need to be successful. And then at the end of the day, we are shifting it from the kid is refusing to learn or can't learn to saying, no, we need to be helping them learn. We need to own what's coming out in terms of grades. And so, for our teachers, it's been a hard kind of discussion around, they own the students that are failing their classes. They own that outcome. And so when that happens, there needs to be an improvement plan, not just with the students, but that teacher. Because what we have found is that given the right supports, our students will succeed every single time in that classroom learning environment if we can make sure we are actually giving the right those supports. Now, granted, sometimes that looks different. We have kids that are on different graduation tracks, or they're in different programs, or we have to get real creative in terms of scheduling or whatnot. But we'll do that. But we do need the teachers to step up and do their part too. And I would say 95% of our teachers are totally on board, because what they've been really asking for is the help. to get there. And so, we're really partnering with them, and we're teaming, and it's not a combative process, it's collaborative. And that has been really instrumental in making that change.
I would throw one last little bit in here. Often what we find is that sites or districts, but sites don't really have a shared understanding or definition of what we mean by engagement. And if they do, it may not be at the instructional level in terms of what kids need to be doing to be engaged, what teachers need to be doing, how your instructional design, et cetera. One strategy to leverage the expertise in your staff, do empathy interviews with some of your kids that are furthest from opportunity, and ask them to identify when you've been fully engaged. What did you experience? What did you see? What did you do? And then look to surface the what do you see and what do you do, and define this concept of engagement, what you're asking teachers to do with student voice in that way. A lot of times what happens is you've got teachers that genuinely want to engage fully all of their kids, but, and this to the point that was just made, they just don't necessarily know what or how to do it. And what we see, we've never been on a campus where there weren't some unbelievable teachers in terms of fully engaging kids. The expertise is on the building, is at the site level. You got to bubble up what it is, that the little things and the key moves that those teachers, phenomenal teachers that are on site, do to fully engage kids. Okay, I am mindful of time. I thank you, Isabel, for that question and the lead-in story. I'm gonna, if I'm not seeing, and I apologize if you're like physically raising your hand because I can't see it, but we'll go ahead and shut down. I want to thank you all for taking the time. And we will have we've got one more session later this spring. I want to thank Aaliyah so much for taking your time today and to share the amazing work that you've all been doing, and you, and particularly in your role, and Kenny and Carlos for literally not even sprinting across the street, but finding a spot within the meeting space that you're in to jump on, and Manuel for tap dancing at the beginning. I appreciate that. Sustainability, think about that. What we started off with, the SYS. There's a reason we speak to it that way. The next, we will be back together. Guys, April 15th, isn't that like tax day or something? You can't forget that. April 15th will be our third session downstream. And again, thank you, Kenny, Carlos, and Aaliyah for sharing your work. And thank you all from the Central Coast for showing up. Thank you, guys.